Finding and hiring the right people can be a struggle for a lot of companies. In this episode, we'll explore some of the different options and avenues you can take when getting ready to put up your help wanted sign. Challenges to find and hire people with the desired experience are real, and in some cases, expensive. But what is the best way to find talent? What other methods are there to explore? Is bringing up green talent really a worst case scenario? If you're struggling to fill a drafting or engineering position, you're going to want to stay tuned. From Microvellum Software, this is Exchange, where we discuss all things woodworking and Microvellum so you can streamline the way you work to maximize your efforts and your profits. I'm James Drury, and in this episode, RJ and I are joined by Jacob Edmond, yes, the Jacob Edmond, to discuss the challenge of finding skilled employees, why some companies may struggle, and what can be done to combat the challenge. Jacob has an extensive knowledge of the millwork industry and is out doing his own thing now as the CEO of Duckworks Millwork Solutions. If you're familiar with Microvellum, you've either seen his forum posts, read his blogs, or reached out to him to help think through a process for your shop. To steal a line from farmers, he knows a thing or two because he's seen a thing or two. Here's how that discussion went. Well, Jacob, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with RJ and I and to be on this exchange. And before we get started, I would like to ask you to kind of introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and what it is that you're doing right now.
My name is Jacob Edmond. I have spent about the last decade or so managing engineering departments for architectural millwork companies, particularly departments that utilize Microvellum for manufacturing millwork and casework. Most recently, I was with USA Millwork and as vice president of engineering, and now I have started my own company, Duckworks Millwork Consulting, and that is the vehicle through which I am consulting with millwork companies across the country, helping with anything from department and process improvement, implementation, Microvellum consulting, and general software consulting. So integrations with ERPs, manufacturing software, and just overall process improvement. Trying to capitalize on the experience I've gained struggling as an engineering manager in this industry without a lot of resources. Trying to figure out how do we utilize our software and how do we minimize how many solutions we have to touch, and then how they all talk to each other, as well as how to recruit and staff and train teams and leadership to be able to run our companies as efficiently as possible.
So Jacob, your experience really sounds like it's going to tie in perfectly to what we're going to be discussing today. The topic for today, we're going to discuss the struggle and challenges that companies are having when it comes to finding, hiring, and training new Microvellum users. This topic really came up. Had a company reach out a couple of weeks ago, kind of in a more rural setting, and they're struggling to find Microvellum users. And so he reached out to me to see if I had anybody, one that might be able to work remotely, but really what they're looking for is somebody in-house. So, and as far as Microvellum is concerned, that's going to require probably somebody to relocate. And that can be tough for a lot of companies, especially companies that find themselves in that rural setting. But I think companies in general find themselves struggling with that. And I mean, in your experience, and especially in what you're doing now, what are you finding?
Yeah, so definitely. I'm talking to business owners and companies almost every day now that are having that same issue. And it is, compounded in a number of ways. One, as you mentioned, is location. It's not just finding somebody that has the skill set you need, but it's finding somebody who either you can support to work remote or can relocate to be where you need them. But on top of that, we're in a another transition period in our industry. So maybe 15, 20 years ago, and even longer for some early adopters was, hey, we're starting to adopt technology in our industry and CNC equipment and then the software that supports it, right? And so that transition led to experienced millworkers learning CAD, learning CAM, and kind of, they had experience on the shop floor, in the field, manufacturing hands-on, and then they were pairing with that experience and knowledge, new skills in software. And so what I'm seeing a lot of is, okay, we're coming to the tail end of that, kind of generation of millwork engineers' careers at a lot of times. And so what we have, particularly here in the States, is a lot of millwork companies that are recruiting from the same pool of talent. And that pool of talent is largely, mid or later career millwork engineers who have experience. And most companies are looking for engineers that are ready to go. Hey, we hire you. You already know Microvellum. You already know millwork. Plug and play. You already have the experience. And so what that means is you're taking that person from another company. And that process kind of repeats itself. But within that, if you really imagine and think about it, okay, if, whatever that pool is today is every day shrinking, not a lot of companies, if any, are adding new engineers to that pool, right? Or it's at a lesser rate than where they're leaving. So either through retirement, either through leaving the industry, or even promotion to other roles as project managers or business development, right? Or back into manufacturing. So the rate at which that pool is shrinking is larger than it being replenished. And so what that leaves is companies now that are stuck. A lot of companies are seeing booming business right now, especially kind of in a post-COVID environment or economy. There's a lot of work. A lot of companies are seeing, hey, I can go sell more work than I can get through my engineering. And so I'm having to make a decision on whether to take this job or not based on, can I get shop drawings or can I get it through engineering? Not my manufacturing capacity, not my ability to sell or perform the work other than my engineering capacity. So that is a lot of, the industry problem. And with it comes, how do we find talent that can get up to speed and get trained? And most companies don't have the option or in-house know-how to self-train and develop that talent.
Okay. So with companies struggling with that side of it, what avenues have you seen that companies are exploring? I know, remote work is a big one, and like you said, there's a finite kind of pool of engineers out there, and it's shrinking, right? What can we do maybe collectively to help with that? And RJ, I don't know if in your experience as well, what you've seen and any ideas that worked for your company or you wish could have worked for your company. I mean, I'd love to hear from both of y'all on that.
Yeah, that's actually something I was thinking about. Where I came from, like Jacob was talking about, was, trying to find the help that's out there, and the limited amount of people that have the knowledge, that have the skill. We were thinking, what can we do as a company to bring those people in, onboard them, get them to the level that we expect them to get at least, initially, to start, helping out with some projects. And yeah, it was really difficult. So, the problem that we were running into was we were bringing in people that had very little experience or knowledge of Microvellum at all. So, there was a plan of, let's put together a process so we can bring in somebody that doesn't have that experience that we're looking for, but we can train them up, But then what we experienced was, given the capacity and the size shop that we were, the amount of work that we were bringing in, people in-house couldn't do this training. So that was something, that I was thinking, as far as, as a company, it would be good to look into what they can do to bring on somebody that doesn't have that experience, and maybe not go through the process in-house to get that training that they need, but use some of the other resources that are out there. And that's something that, we'll talk about more today, is just what other resources are there that's out there for a new user learning to, wanting to learn Microvellum. What are the steps that they can take to get themselves to that level that a company owner is looking for? So it was really difficult for us trying to find that help. And so, creating a process to try to onboard them, that was difficult too. Because again, you can think about how much time it takes to get somebody up to speed, especially in a small company. I never found that time. I never, it was very difficult. So we ran into a couple situations where, the training was happening, but it wasn't the right training, and that's something that kind of made me think about something that, you talked about, James, as far as like communication, we talk about not more communication, but better communication. The same thing kind of in lines with training. Maybe it's not the more training, but it's the right training. So we were given new people or new employees that were coming on and trying to get them to be part of the team. We were giving them the training that we thought that they needed or that could help them get to that level, but it wasn't the right training. And it was just because of lack of time. It's a small company. And if one person is going to be in charge of training new employees, or, one person is in charge of bringing somebody on and getting them up to speed and teaching them all the ins and outs of Microvellum, along with getting jobs out to the shop, generating shop drawings. For me, it was also scheduling projects and, figuring out, what issues we were coming across out in the field, in the shop. So lack of time, big one. And then just the right training. I think that's a big thing that we can probably talk about a lot more.
Yeah. I think for most companies, you get stuck between a rock and a hard place, and that I have so much more work than my current team and engineering can get through, right? So that means all hands on deck, every resource that can do anything. And a lot of times that means somebody that doesn't have CAD skills or Microvellum skills is doing manual material takeoffs. They might be, hand cut listing anything possible, right? And then it's like, what's the stuff that has to go through Microvellum? That's the stuff my most experienced guys are going to work on. So then you're left with, okay, so say I do get an additional resource. Who is there to support that resource, train them, teach them, get them set up? And so you get stuck, like I said, between a rock and a hard place. I need more resources. I don't have time to set those resources up. And really what it boils down to is you do not have process. You don't have documented, scalable, repeatable processes in place that you can sit somebody and say, hey, you know how to use these tools, Microvellum, AutoCAD, Bluebeam even, CutRight, Artist, whatever your tools of your company is using, right? Even if you get somebody with that experience, they have to know, where do you put your files? Where's your library? How do you use these things, right? And so if you have good documentation, good processes that you can literally sit somebody down with, here's our tools, this much, here's how we use these tools, here's a document, then you're starting to cook with gas. But very few companies have that. So, I think if we take a step back and kind of like cross off the list, okay, what are most companies familiar with today as far as how they solve these problems? So one is recruiters, right? If you're a business owner, you're probably very familiar with, and you either have a love-hate relationship with recruiters, right? But you're going to, that is one option that's widely available in this industry. And there's a number of niche recruiters that only serve the woodworking and millwork industries, right? So if you're a business owner, either you're already working with them or you know who they are, most likely, but that is one way people go. And so you say, hey, I'm going to go pay, 20% of an annual salary or whatever the fee is to go get an engineer and hope it works out, right? So obviously, if you're here listening to this podcast, you either aren't doing that or that's not working, or you're looking for other solutions. Another is, hey, I go myself and I recruit, and I find somebody on LinkedIn or Indeed, I post a job listing, I get an applicant, and I say, hey, I need a Microvellum engineer with 3 or 5 years experience, right? You've probably exhausted that. That's why you're here. Third on that list is recruit and hire from within. Say, okay, how do I train somebody that's already in my company, but they're not an engineer today? So that is one very viable, good solution that I think there's ways that most companies today aren't thinking about how to do it differently, though. So in your processes for training an engineer, you think, okay, I'm going to start at the beginning. I need to teach them how to do shop drawing and how to do submittals. And one, that's low risk, because if they totally screw up the shop drawings or do something wrong, I still have that engineering process to catch it and fix it. That makes sense, especially for people who are very green and new to the industry as a whole. Maybe they know AutoCAD. Maybe you've hired an engineer that's familiar with AutoCAD, but you're teaching them Microvellum. Totally makes sense. However, if you're hiring somebody from your shop, and I would say, one, you're probably thinking about somebody who has the most experience, but is nearing, later stages of their career, right? They want to start walking on carpet instead of on concrete and getting, breathing clean air, and that's great. But what I would say is look at your machine operators, look at your CNC operators, your edge band operators, those who are closest to engineering in the process in manufacturing and who are familiar with the outputs from engineering. So if you have a CNC operator or a beam saw operator, and they're already reading your optimizations, they're used to pulling up programs from your engineers, and they're the ones already talking to your engineers saying, hey, I need this program fixed, or can you change this, or testing, right? It is a much easier transition to teach them how to process and release engineering work out of Microvellum and out of engineering, because they know what the output should look like. And they're also very in tune and familiar with some of the current pain points. And so I would start there, say, look, are there any high potential people in my machining department? Maybe you have a young CNC operator who spent a year or 6 months or 5 years out there. He's very familiar with your company's processes. He knows who in the company to go to for what. And it's much easier to train somebody to run that machine and backfill him than it is to find an engineer. That's why we're having these discussions, I would venture to say. So that is like the first place I recommend companies to go. Say, hey, look, you're trying to relocate somebody. You've already got somebody in your shop that already lives there, already works there, already knows your processes, knows your people. Can you teach them Microvellum? Can they sit next to you? And even if you start, say, I'm at zero today, I've got 0 extra resources. Can I start like one afternoon a week? He sits next to your strongest engineer and starts learning, and slowly you introduce that. That is like low risk, low hanging fruit, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. To be honest, that's exactly how I got started in drafting. I was out on the shop floor. I knew AutoCAD. I could draw some lines, right? I knew the basics of it. I was able to kind of present what I was able to do, and they gave me a shot. But that's how it started out. I'd come in the afternoons, a couple days a week, and just sit and observe and just watch. And then after that, it was okay. You're going to come in every day after lunch, and we're going to have you work on the basic stuff. That worked out great. For me, I that's how I learn. I like to observe, and then I like to, get my hands dirty. That's not always the case. And I really liked the fact that you brought up the CNC, and that's probably the closest line to engineering, right? Because when I came in, I wasn't at that engineering stage. I was at the drafting stage. I was drawing cabinets. That was it. I didn't need to know all the other stuff down the line. And I think, like you're saying, that's kind of the hang up a lot of companies have, is thinking that they have to progress each person in that order, right? You got to draft, and then you're going to learn how to engineer, and then you're going to learn how to push it out to the shop. I haven't really ever thought about the other way around.
I've done this a number of times, and one, what I would say is there's some added kind of side benefits of this, like bonuses as well. Most companies have what I would call a barrier, a wall up between engineering and production. And most business owners, this can be kind of the bane of their existence. Like, why can't you guys just get along, And for engineers, it's like, well, we do it right. They just don't understand what we're putting out. And for production, they're not listening to us. We're giving them feedback. And so we always have to fix their mistakes, right? I know nobody listening has those problems, but I've had those problems. And so one, you bring, your machining lead or somebody like that in, they're already acutely in tune and aware of their current pain points. And sometimes a lot of the stuff that they've just accepted, hey, I'm going to just keep fixing this. I'm not even going to try and get engineering to fix this. But suddenly they're faced with the other side of the coin, and they start to realize, oh, now I understand why this was hard for them to solve. Or they start having to speak each other's language and say, oh, you just weren't understanding what I was saying, or I wasn't communicating in a way you understood the problem, right? So you have somebody that suddenly bridged that, and they still have their relationships, and they understand the machining side and the language they speak. And two, they start to be able to solve their own previous problems. And so that allows you to kind of bridge that, build relationships that have those people helping solve your business's problems faster. And so I guess a side note on that, if you're having those issues today and you don't have this candidate, tell your engineers, get them out to walk on the shop floor daily. When your engineers, and especially this is hard when they're remote, but what happens if you're an engineer, this is any position, right? If you're not seeing the other side of who's receiving your output, right? So if I'm an engineer, I'm sending machine code to a machine. If I'm just thinking that, hey, I'm sending it to a machine operator, I don't think about, hey, I'm sending that to RJ. And I like RJ, I'm friends with RJ, and I don't want RJ's job to be more difficult because of me. I feel bad if he has to fix my mistakes. When suddenly it's a person at the other end on the receiving end and a person that you communicate with on a regular basis, that mentality starts to shift automatically. And you start to say, hey, look, I'm going to put a little bit of extra time in this because I know RJ and I have had conversations about, oh yeah, the last time I put this out, there was this issue and I want to fix that. And slowly you start to fix problems. That's like a whole side topic, but it relates to, you're bringing somebody in from the shop and they start to help bridge that gap and they start to be able to speak both engineering and shop speak and machining speak. And two, you always have a backup. If you get in a bind in machining, now you can send this guy out from engineering and he can run that machine again. He can train that machine operator as well as your engineers. And now you start to have a pipeline for both parts of your business. So obviously first is to find a really good candidate that's eager to learn. They're probably eager to say, hey, look, I'm trying to figure out what's a next option in my career. I don't see a path out of the shop or out of running the CNC, right? You suddenly can open up career paths for people. Hey, let's add a skill set. You're adding value to them as an individual contributor to your business. But adding value to them for their career. They're learning a new skill. They're suddenly learning something which is taking up, mental capacity to that's exciting. That's what I love to do. That's what most people love to do, is be challenged at work. And so two, it opens up pathways for them and other people in your business start to see, hey, there's opportunity for growth within this company. So long-term, you're adding value to your people, which adds value to their business, but it adds value for them to want to be retained, to want to stay with you instead of going to another company and looking to leave to find more work or more money. I think it really is a key. You have to have structure and have to have a plan and have to have deliverables. It's not enough to just set a warm body and say, here, RJ, you need another engineer. I got you my CNC operator. Here's a warm body. Now fix it, right? You have to have structure. You have to have realistic expectations. And if it's so much as like, hey, RJ, you've got a lot on your plate already. We can only afford 4 hours a week. Schedule that 4 hours a week. Don't just assume that it's going to happen. You have to set a date, literally mark it on your calendars every Friday or every Monday at noon. This CNC operator is going to turn off his machine and he's going to come in and we're going to spend 4 hours on Monday afternoon. You have to be diligent and disciplined about it to make it happen. Even if the world's on fire, right? Because every Monday or every time you have that, something is going to come up that's going to seem like more important in the moment. Mm-hmm. So you have to be disciplined and diligent about it, and you have to follow up. If you're, a manager or a business owner, and you're trying to support your engineering manager or your engineering team in this, it's not enough to just give them a warm body. You've got to support them and say, what can I do to remove obstacles for you? And when you come and your engineering manager, your engineer is giving you that look on their face like, I've had 28 fires this morning and I haven't even gotten back to the thing I was supposed to be doing first thing this morning. Okay. Are there any of those fires that I can take off your plate? Who's barking down? Do I need to unplug your phone? Can I solve some things? What can you take off their plate that person does not have to do? So most businesses get stuck in a world of like, I'm dependent on a person instead of a process. You have to establish process. You have to constantly reevaluate. Is this require this person or a person? Take any of the stuff off their plate that doesn't require this person to free them up to be able to focus on the training.
Now, what if you're in a position, you're a small shop and you don't have the talent or the personnel out in the shop to bring in? I mean, what kind of options
can companies look for there other than, maybe they don't want to look to a recruiter, right? Or try and fish the job market for, Indeed and whatever else. I mean, we tried all that as well. I mean, we were Central Texas. So we had quite a big pool to choose from. I say we were kind of centered between Austin and San Antonio. And so we put feelers out in the newspapers, we put it out online, and it was still difficult to bring them in, especially just with the location that we were at, because it was more rural. So what other options can people look for and explore in that kind of a situation?
Yeah. So what I would say is if you don't have the ability to recruit within and you're struggling to go find experienced talent, hire green talent, go find entry-level talent and advertise as such. Say, look, what we are looking to fill, so one, you need to define a job description. And if you don't have that internally, I would start there. And, that can look like, okay, what are the responsibilities of this role? Put out a couple, say, and based on your applicants, change course. So what I mean by that is most people are looking for a jack of all trades engineer, right? Hey, we have processes, where each engineer owns their own project. You need to create process and you need to create an assembly line. So out in manufacturing, in today's shops, nobody builds cabinets. And what I mean by that is you have an assembly line. So there's maybe one person at the end of the line that assembles the final cabinet. And even that's usually broken down. They're probably putting it into case clamp. But all along the way, there's somebody who cuts the parts. There's somebody who edge bands the parts. There's somebody who does edge machining. There's somebody who does face machining. There's somebody who puts hardware on, right? So no one person builds cabinets. No one person has to engineer an entire project or draft and engineer the entire project. And the more you build process to make that possible, the less dependent you are on talent that has all of those skill sets. So if you have 2 or 3 engineers today, and you say, hey, I need 4, I need 5, it is going to be a very tall order for you to publish a job description that says, hey, I need a clone of my current best engineer. And you need to be able to come in from day one and do shop drawings on your own, coordinate with clients on your own, do Microvellum on your own, process store shop, or So if you can go and say, hey, I'm looking for an entry-level drafter, AutoCAD experience preferred, we will teach you everything else. You don't have to have millwork experience, but if you have architectural drafting experience, that's ideal or great. If you have some manufacturing or even CNC experience. But today, if you go to pretty much any metro area, there's technical schools. And there's schools that probably have CAD courses, CAD programs, drafting programs, architectural drafting programs. So if you go and say, look at their syllabus, look at their course catalog, do they have AutoCAD? Do they have architectural drafting? Do they have Revit? All of those things are valuable. And you can go even talk to that dean or that instructor. I partnered with one here, Gwinnett Tech. They had a drafting technology program and they had an advisory board. And I said, hey, I know I'm going to need to hire people at some point in the future. What can I do to help? Let me be on the advisory board. I'll start to get to know the teachers, the instructors. And through that, they can start to tell me, hey, they want to place their students, their graduates. So they're going to tell you, I've got this really promising, person that's about to graduate, and they know AutoCAD. You don't have to teach them, everything, but say, look, I can bring them in and give them a career path. They're looking for entry-level work, entry-level pay, entry-level experience. Be realistic with your experience. Be realistic with what your expectations are, and invest in them for a future. And so from there, then you say, hey, look, here's somebody that has entry-level experience and they can start by doing just shop drawings for us. If you have Microvellum and you're drawing in Microvellum, if you're not, you should be. Let's talk about how we can get you there. But if you are, it makes this process that much easier. All you need to do is say, here's Microvellum. Here's how you create a project. Here's our catalog. Here's how you put it in a product. What is a product? It's what we build. It's a cabinet. So they don't have to know all the answers to, do we do full captured backs? Do we do, Dado or dowel construction? That's built into your library. So lower the barrier of entry with your processes and your tools, and then you can lower your expectations of what candidate you need to hire. And then over time, they will become a clone of your current engineer. Because if you think back to how your current engineers got to where they're at, they didn't start where they're at now.
I think Jacob hit on it as far as investing in your people. That's the biggest thing. I mean, if you're bringing on somebody and expecting them just to pick it up on their own and not investing in them and giving them the tools that they need, one of the biggest things that I saw, and I kind of would tell myself all the time, is like, I would see it firsthand as far as what's going on. And I would tell myself, like, we're not setting up these people for success, right? We're setting them up to fail. We're not giving them the tools and the resources that they need to get better. We're saying, hey, you're green. Here's a company. We have some good resources that are here. They've been here for a while. Go out to the shop. Go talk to the shop. Go over to, this guy's desk over here. And then Jacob is over here. He can help you too. Talk amongst everybody. And it's like, you have to do more than that, right? You can't expect somebody to come on board and feel comfortable. First of all, just say, hey, show me what I need to be doing. Let me go out to the shop and talk to the guys in the shop. They don't know anybody, right? So you got to invest in them, give them those tools, give them those tools that they need to get them up to speed and make them better. So yeah, I think you hit on it, Jacob. Invest in your people. It's a big issue.
And along those lines, if you start to do that and you're doing it successfully, your people will recruit for you. If people want to work for you and they're already working for you and they feel like, hey, there's career advancements opportunities here. I like my job. I like where I work. They want to bring people along for the ride. Your engineers are already talking to other people. Hopefully they're on the Microvellum forums, or they're on LinkedIn, or they're on Facebook, or they've worked at another company before. So one, if you've recruited an engineer from another company, they know other people in the industry. They have resources. They're talking to people. And if they like their job and they like the culture there, they're going to recruit people to come work for you. And that's going to make everything we're talking about a lot easier. So invest in your current people. Two, if you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, hey, I've got an engineering department, but they kind of suck. They're not efficient, and I think they should be better. I need to go find more engineers. What are you doing today to make them better, the people you already have? If anything, do you see a path to do that? Have you already written them off that, hey, they're the wrong people? Or are you working around your engineering department? Because we all know, look, I'm an engineer. I know we're difficult to deal with. Engineers by nature are very stubborn and very difficult to deal with. But
no, we're not.
we have a particular set of skills, right? And when wielded well, we're very efficient and very effective and very powerful. So that's why I always pound on relationship, right? It's very hard for us, most engineers, to develop relationships and understand the softer side of things. Invest in finding what makes your engineers tick. What are they struggling with? How can I get them to think differently? We want to solve problems the best way possible, not the fastest way possible. And so having them understand, hey, look, you are right, but here's the business need. It's more important that we get this done today than we get it done the best way possible. It's great that you are willing to get it done the best way possible. We need to get this done today. Start having those conversations with, you have to have honest conversations with your team. Hey, look, I'm struggling as your boss, as your business owner, to understand why it's taking so long for this process. Having that conversation, not in an accusatory way, but like, what can I do to either build in more time? If this is really how long it takes, is our software not there? Do we not have the right tools? What can I do? And understand, maybe they're going to tell you, hey, you need to spend $10,000. Okay, I can't afford that now, but at least I now know what the obstacle is, right? You need to understand those things and have those honest conversations with them. And if you haven't, at least it's always easier to invest and develop your current staff than go and recruit more. You might have to do both, but you need to invest in your people, because if you're not investing in the ones you have, what makes you think you're going to invest in the replacements?
It's got to be a cultural change, right? You've got to look at each of your employees as an investment, right? Whether it's through the training, whether it's through providing them with the tools that they need. And I think a lot of companies actually struggle with that too. Maybe they're the company that people keep recruiting from, right? And so they're kind of like at a point where they're saying, okay, I'm done investing because every time I do, those people leave. Maybe there's something good that you're doing, right? You're training them up, you're giving them the education. That's a great culture to have. Maybe there's something else you should be looking at to help retain while building up. Maybe there's something else in there that is, hammering away at the issue and driving those people away and making it harder for you to find people. I really think many companies don't have those conversations that they should be having.
Well, on that note, if you're not doing exit interviews, start now. At the very least, have an informal conversation. Hey, I know you took this other job. I know you're not changing your mind, but can you give me some feedback on what I could have done differently or what I can do differently in the future? If it's just more money, hey, now I know. If it's culture, if it's maybe there's a problematic person in your organization that they can't stand dealing with, or it's process. But you need to start having an honest, being introspective about why. And not just blaming it on other companies, because you can't control that. But there's always going to be other companies that are going to come and recruit and do whatever it takes to get talent and not solve this problem for themselves. So once you start to understand, hey, why are people leaving? Am I having an mass exodus of people? Why is it? Then once you have that information, then you can start to do something with it. And two, if you're hesitant or scared of investing in your people because they might get stolen, you're not scared of investing in people. You're just not investing in your business. And if this is your business, that's a prerequisite to be successful, whatever the
bigger problem going on. Yeah.
And so one, if you have a process for doing this, it's not the end of the world if they do move on, right? You already have a pipeline. You already have that entry level person. You already have a repeatable process to go and train talent. Hey, that's great. You're moving on and you found another opportunity to maybe they need to go and be a leader in another company and you don't have a role for that in your company. That's not a bad thing. You should want to develop people and see them succeed in their career, but you have to build a scalable, repeatable solution to plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Developing them for your business is developing them for the industry. Like you said, we already have a finite amount of resources for that. So there shouldn't be no opposition to creating that pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah. The stronger the industry, right? I mean, the more successful the industry just overall, I mean, it creates more more talented people out there. I mean, like Jacob, like you were saying, I mean, if you're worried about somebody that you've trained and you've brought them up and groomed them and become, created a great engineer or drafter and you're worried about them leaving, yeah, there's a bigger problem going on, because really, if you have a process set up that works and it worked for this person and it wasn't the person themselves that got them to that level, but it was the company that did it, well, then bringing on somebody new shouldn't be a problem. Because, as a business owner, you were kind of responsible to help that person continue to grow, continue to learn, move on and experience something a little bit different. Maybe that, like Jacob was saying, change is good. But as a company owner, yeah, you're probably only afraid of losing people because you don't feel confident enough to bring somebody on that's new and get them to that level that you want them to be at.
Well, and I think it comes also, there's some valid concerns, but again, it becomes from like, you're tired of losing the people that have your institutional knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're dependent on people instead of process, it is painful to lose people. And that's why you have to build process. But, two, there's entire industries that are in organizations and companies that are based around being a proving ground and a training ground for starting people's careers. And so the flip side of that is if people in the industry start to see, hey, I can go be an engineer at this company, and I know that I'm going to be able to springboard from that to somewhere else I want to get my career, people are going to be banging on your door to be engineers for you. And you're always going to have a steady flow of talent coming in. So, you have to figure out what is my, do I want to position myself that way? Can there be an advantage to that of like, hey, I can have a steady flow of talent and I can build a process that I don't need to have 3, senior level engineers, but maybe I can have 1 and 4 entry level people. There's a lot of ways to look at this and skin this cat.
I look back at the company I came from, right? And a lot of the struggles are the struggles that we're discussing today. And I think that creating those processes, and I'm looking back now at when I was the manager over that, and I definitely could have done a much better job to establish those processes and really cement them. But as you've said, those processes have to be developed. They have to be created, and you have to invest. And I think going back to the whole culture statement, like you have to create a culture of improvement. And I think that then creates that kind of destination shop, which is what you were just alluding to, right? You become that place that people want to go. They want to learn from there. And then they know that the doors are open and they can go wherever they want after that. And so you you become that replenishing shop, right? And you're always just bringing in talent. Maybe that creates struggles for you. There's probably pros and cons to it. I mean, you're going to be bringing in talent that doesn't know much, or maybe you get lucky and you bring somebody in who does have experience, and then you've kind of got the quirks that you got to work around, with people like that, because everybody comes in with, I want to do it this way. And it doesn't matter what process you have in line. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. Well, you've got to firmly set the mark and say, no, this is the way we function. This is how we do things. Anyway, that's kind of a different topic, but, creating that environment where people want to come. And I look at some of the other shops that I've visited, and I see a lot of that. I come in and, a lot of it was for training, and I'm looking around, I'm like, man, I would love to come and work in a shop like this. I mean, one, it's clean. Two, you're taking advantage of technology out on the shop floor, right? Maybe you've gone paperless. You've either got tablets or you've got, a laptop or some kind of station out at each bench where, any kind of teenage kid that walks in there, or early 20s person that walks in there is going to look around and be like, this is a pretty sweet setup. And then I think that just attracts that talent more. So I think that's something that shops should be looking at as well when it comes to culture. Maybe that's the culture. Maybe that's the piece that was missing that I was talking about earlier. What is it that if you're losing people, maybe that's it. Maybe you're not taking full advantage of all the other tools out there to really streamline your entire process from beginning to end out in the shop. I mean, there are a lot of cool things out there that shops can be taken advantage of. Yes, it's an investment that maybe might be out of your price tag right now, but there are things that you can put in place now to start changing the culture to becoming that destination shop.
I think also, if you are losing people because of money and people are leaving and you in the past, hey, I've lost a very important engineer and they went somewhere and that paid them more than I could afford. You need to take some time and do a real honest evaluation of what that's costing your business, not just their salary, but one, okay, I'm going to have to replace them. What's it going to cost me to get back to that productivity level? One, just head for head. What am I going to spend? Am I going to pay a recruiter? But two, what is the opportunity cost of your business? Right now, how much work are you losing out on or turning down on because of not solving this problem of your engineering, right? So you're not just, I think a lot of business owners are only thinking about, hey, if I spent this much more money now, that's based on just solving the problem with my current revenue. How much more revenue can I get by spending this money? So could I go land that $6 million job or that $2 million job? Could I add $1 million or 10 million to my annual revenue by adding an engineer, right? Like, you need to have that number in your head. Once you've got your process established, look at historical data for the last 5 years. Hopefully you have access to that in some level, but hey, what did I spend on engineering labor and salaries versus revenue per year over year? And then start to get an idea, okay, I need to, have in my head, this is how much work each head of engineer can produce. So, if you're a normal shop and you look at AWI numbers, there's some averages there, but what is your business? And two, okay, if I add a head, what should that mean? Or if I add $5 million in revenue, how many engineers do I have to add? You need to have an idea of those numbers for your business. And then you need to be evaluating that against your salary decisions. Hey, what's it going to cost me if I were to lose my lead engineer? Should I be giving him a raise now to ensure that I don't? And how much would it cost my business to replace him? Right? Like, you need to be doing that before you have to make that decision in a pinch of, oh crap, he's going to leave tomorrow if I don't pay him. A lot of times it's going to be cheaper now than it is till you wait till you're making a counteroffer. And two, even if you do convince them to stay after the counteroffer, it's going to cost you more, and they're going to leave eventually anyways, because they had to go and get an offer to get a raise. So that is a tough topic that not a lot of business owners want to talk about, but it's very real. And you need to be thinking about that ahead of time and constantly evaluating and looking back at, most shops have enough turnover that you're forced to do this anyways, but engineering is kind of stuck in the middle. Even project management world probably has enough turnover that you're just used to this. But engineering is tough because they're so integral and tied into software and process and the fundamental, like they're the cog that keeps everything turning in a lot of businesses. So really take a whole hard look and produce a budget. Say, okay, I want to grow from 10 to 15 million or 10 to 12 million. You got to think I'm going to have to spend more in engineering, and it's either going to be overtime and burnt out employees, or it's going to be planned and kind of, well thought out.
In our discussion, you've also kind of introduced a fourth method for, not kind of introduced, you did introduce a fourth method for finding employees, right? You talked about the recruiters, talked about just searching the job market through LinkedIn and other job sites, things like that, and then looking from within. Well, the fourth one was the education side of things, right? The trade schools, high schools, things like that. What can companies be doing to create those relationships? You mentioned that you had created a relationship with a local place near you. So how did you, you talked about doing that through the advisory board, but how can others start on a similar path? What advice could you give to someone in that position where they could go out and get tied into their local high school, trade school, maybe something a little higher up as well?
Yeah. So, all of those programs want a sponsor, want, a vehicle. It doesn't even have to cost you money, but just a business owner that says, hey, I'm looking for talent and I'm interested in, that is another resource for them. And those instructors, those program leads, want to hear from you and want to do work to capitalize on you as a resource. So, just look and say, hey, are there any technical, programs in either high schools or technical schools near me? You'll be surprised how near you there probably is a program. There are still a lot of high schools. I know in our DC location, they had a relationship with one. I think it was in Virginia. They had a technical high school program, and they just invited them out. Hey, would you like to come to our shop for lunch one day? One, if all it amounts to is they get to tour a shop, they are going to be ecstatic and love that. But through that, you're going to develop relationships and a path to say, hey, maybe you don't start with hiring an engineer. Maybe you start with hiring a graduate that, hey, he wants to come and get shop experience, and you can teach him to run your case clamp and your CNCs. And in a year, maybe he'll become an engineer. That is a great pipeline to start now, maybe even before you need it. It's low cost, low risk. You're getting labor out of them. They're getting experience in a job. And, it could really lead to a really valuable asset. But two, a carrot you can give them is Microvellum will sponsor schools. So if you act as a sponsor, say, hey, there's this program near me. I would like to start recruiting from them or partner with them. Your company can be the sponsor for Microvellum to provide Microvellum software to them at no cost to anybody. Microvellum will provide the free software, and all you have to do is say, hey, I'm the sponsor. I'm going to be the liaison and act as a resource. And that could be even somebody in your engineering department. Again, when you talk about culture, your engineers want that type of opportunity to say, hey, you're going to let me go once a month or once every 3 months to meet with these. It might even be once a year to meet with this school program, invest in the next generation, and possibly handpick my future, employees or teammates. That's exciting. That's something that you can invest in that's very little cost, if any, for your business. And they're going to be eager to go outside of their, for me as an engineering manager and engineer, I would say, hey, I'll do that for free. I love to go see this program. So that is one of the biggest opportunities is you can sponsor a school. They're going to get free software out of it. They're going to get the software that you ultimately want them to know anyways. And then you can start to create relationships and a pipeline. There's actually a sixth option too that we can talk about it. I don't know if you want anything else before we move on.
All I was going to say is, with that approach, you also are bringing attention to that particular program in that school, right? Maybe it's a a program that hasn't done so well in the past and could be on the chopping block for, getting rid of. Being able to create that channel or create that pipeline, right, where students are going into that program and then have a job after, it's going to make that program more enticing for the students going to that high school. Mm-hmm. And then that makes making your shop, changing that culture, making it a destination shop even more important, right? Because if I've got another shop in another town, 20 minutes away, 15 minutes away, whatever, and they're taking advantage of the technology and these students are going around and touring the different shops in the area, you're probably going to start missing out if you haven't changed your culture and really emphasize, look, we are here to invest in you and your future. Mm-hmm. And that investment will pay dividends for us.
I mean, and it's immediate marketing. It's immediate, like just by the act of being willing to do that and invest in that, that says a lot about your business and it makes people suddenly interested in you. Those students are going to go tell their parents. Those, that can multiply quickly to a lot of connections in your community.
Might be a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about, what we're trying to do as a company here at Microvellum, as far as creating that pool of talent and making that, that footprint a little bit larger. So, one thing that we're moving forward with here on our end is creating Microvellum University, a place where people can come and learn how to use the software and put them, in the position to go out there and get a good job. Company owners that are struggling trying to find people internally, if there's not enough people that you can pull in from the shop and there's not enough people in your area that have the experience with Microvellum or just CAD in general, Microvellum University could be something that would provide that pool of talent for you. So that's something that we're moving forward with on our end, and with our laser focus on helping new users and companies with the onboarding process of new hires.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to tag on that, if you're listening to this and you're an engineer or you're looking at getting into this industry, or you are, but you don't know Microvellum and you're looking to advance your career, there is opportunity. And there's resources to learn Microvellum. The Microvellum community is free. So community.microvellum.com. It's an open forum. It's a knowledge base. You don't have to pay anything to access it and to contribute to it, to ask questions. You can reach out to Microvellum through there and get a free trial of Microvellum. You can see job listings on there of companies who are looking for talent. And you can even post, say, hey, I know AutoCAD, I know cabinet vision, I know, millwork, but I want to learn and I'm looking for a job. This is your notice that companies need you. Companies need talent. So if you're looking to advance your career and say, hey, what am I going to do? I'm a 20, 30-year-old, 18-year-old, and I really like Minecraft and SketchUp and 3D printing and woodworking. There's a career path and there's a vehicle towards that. And so reach out to me, reach out to RJ and James on the forums. We're on there. I'd love to help you find a path in this career.
Yeah. And just like you said, I mean, I know the forums for me were instrumental in the path I'm on now. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the community forums and the just infinite amount of wisdom and knowledge from the users that are out there. And the fact that they're willing to share that knowledge is another, added bonus to that whole process.
James, sorry, just real quick, just one thing I would like to add to that. That's one thing that I wish I did a little bit more of on my end. When I was learning Microvellum is to get out there on the forums. I mean, I would read it all the time. I would kind of go through posts. I mean, James, I've come across your posts a ton. Jacob, yours as well. I mean, I know you guys are very active on the forums. But that was one thing that I would like to tell people that are maybe a little bit, I don't know, maybe not too comfortable getting out there on the forums and talking to other people. Do it. Don't be afraid. That's one thing that I wish I had done more of, was get out there. And if you think it's, maybe it's a dumb question, it's probably not, right? It's something that other people have had to deal with, or they've asked themselves, and they can provide that insight. They can help you out with those answers to your questions. So yeah, don't be afraid to get on the forum. That's something that would definitely help you out, especially coming up as a new user.
And if you're currently a Microvellum engineer working at a company who isn't current on support or doesn't invest in you, and you're looking for opportunities to learn, better your career or advance your career, how can I help my company do all the stuff we're talking about when they're not willing or able? Get on the forums, reach out to us, start the conversation. But, there's a very good book. I think you guys read with the book club about how to lead when you're not in charge, or is that what it's called?
Yes. Yeah. I was just about to bring that up, actually.
Yeah. So, books like that are great resources, but, also called like managing up. Like, I'm not in a position of power in my company, but how can I make an impact and make a change for the better? One, for my career, for myself, to make my job better. But two, my peers and my companies, so I was that kind of, ask for forgiveness instead of permission engineer. Obviously it has to work, it has to be successful, but I was curious. And I worked at a company when I started that didn't have active support and the forums weren't open. So I was constantly like Googling, how do I do this in Microvellum? It didn't exist back then, and so, but trying to find any resources possible. There's more resources today than ever before. This podcast, the community. So I learned, once I did get on the forums, I learned most of what I know by helping solve other people's problems. I would, first thing in the morning, go into work, I would get on the forums, I would see who posted a question, and I would say, I think I can solve that. And on my break time, I would figure out a solution and I would post it. And then I would see what James or whoever else posted and try to say, hey, could I do that differently? You learn a little bit every day. And 10 years later, you know a lot more. But as you learn those things, you come up with solutions that you can use for your company in your everyday life, So at finding ways to have conversations with your owner. And again, if you want, hey, how can I broach this topic? How can I approach this with the company? And worst case scenario, you learn a lot and you go find a better job. So I think we've been speaking a lot in this podcast to business owners and managers, like how do you grow your business? But speaking directly to the engineers and employees out there as well, grow, learn, find advancement opportunities. And if it's not in your company, you're being stifled, it's okay to look elsewhere and find somewhere that is willing to invest in their culture and their people.
Yep. And just to piggyback on that, just communication. Communication is key, right? You got to talk about what's going on within the company, within the office. You have to speak up. If something's not working, talk to the owner, talk to the people that are making those decisions. It's going to help. Yeah. If you just stay silent, it's only going to get worse.
Right. That goes right into what how to lead when you're not in charge is all about, right? It's creating a level of influence. That's what you have to leverage change at work when you're not in charge, is you have to create influence. And then as other people start to listen to you and start to buy into you, that's when you can manage up. And then your bosses are going to sit down and say, okay, let's talk about the issues. I know you have some valuable input. Let's see what we can figure out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's one more topic. We probably should have talked about it earlier, but I'd say the sixth way people might try to attack this problem. Hey, I've got a capacity issue in drafting or engineering. And maybe it's short term, is outsourcing or outstaffing, right? So if you're in the millwork industry for any period of time, you already know there's a lot of regular players out there. You can outsource your shop drawings. And it's very easy. Well, I'd say easy. It's very easy to get somebody to sign up to do your shop drawings in AutoCAD, right? And you've probably already tried this and had poor results. Again, if you don't have good process and expectations and clear communication on what your expectations are from them and how your process is, it's probably going to go poorly. but there are good resources out there that can do shop drawings for you. And your goal should not be just to get shop drawings, but again, if you're a Microvellum shop and you should find somebody that can draw in Microvellum for you in your library. And again, that's something that a service that I provide, and there's other good services out there that provide it. Talk to your Microvellum account manager. They can connect you with some good resources and recommendations and referrals for that. But you should be looking at that as a tool, not the tool. So when you scale up and you say, hey, I've got a sudden influx of work that I want to be able to sell and I have to commit to shop drawings, that's when you use it, but it should not be a constant, right? And so say, hey, look, I need to be able to increase my throughput. And two, plan it to where you're saying, okay, does that allow me to shift my internal engineering resources to focus on getting production out to the shop? And then, but you should always have an internal point that is communicating with and managing that external resource for your drafting. Have a defined process, have a handoff just like you would internally. Assume and know that they know less about how your company does things than your internal employees. So you're going to have to do more work than you do to hand off to your engineers. If you're a kind of company that just sends an email, says, hey, we got a new job, do your thing, that's not going to cut it to be able to successfully outsource.
Yeah, it's that better communication, not more communication. I agree.
So go into it with realistic expectations and you can be successful. And that is a realistic vehicle. But if you're struggling today just to get work through your internal shop, you're probably going to have a painful experience if you try that as a relief valve right now.
Jacob, I do want to thank you for being here today. I really want to just give you the best of luck on your new endeavor with Duckworks. It sounds like you've got some really cool things going on. And I would actually like to have you on at a later point. I know in our previous discussions, you had talked about like a standardization right across the industry. And I'd like to poke your brain on all that and get your ideas on what you're actually thinking with that. Cause I've got a few up my sleeve as well that I think, talking about that would be a great step forward, not only for Microvellum, but for the industry as a whole. Cause I think, the industry is something that a lot of people can really enjoy. There are a lot of people out there who do projects on their homes all the time. They can take that, and make a career path out of it. And I don't think a lot of them actually look at it that way. I think a lot of them just kind of look at it as a hobbyist kind of thing and don't pursue it. But there's a lot of potential out there and room for growth. And, I think being able to create a standard that we all use and can create those processes, right, to create that pipeline to bring more into the woodworking industry. I'd love to be a part of that. So I'd love to have you back on to poke your brain on your ideas there.
Yeah, say a lot about that. And I think there's a lot to touch on there.
Yeah, I think that would be a great topic.
I really enjoyed getting the opportunity to have this discussion with RJ and Jacob. Seems like just about every other day, I'm hearing of open job positions in the millwork industry. There are so many opportunities available. So hopefully, if you're one of those shops looking for someone, maybe now you've got a few different ideas on what to do. And thanks for being here with us. Stay tuned for more great things. Until next time, learn, grow, exchange.
If you enjoyed today's discussion, please like and subscribe and leave us some love in the comments. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media and join our open community forums and knowledge base at community.microvellum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.